Riding that midnight train to Georgia, it's the Medicare for the Lazy Man podcast. The Medicare podcast that happily supported Brexit. And now proving he wasn't born in a barn, it's Medicare expert Doug Jones.
Why, thank you, Drew McMillan, my Canadian nephew, one of my several, or at least one of my two Canadian nephews. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Medicare for the Lazy Man podcast, the exciting Medicare podcast, as opposed to all the other Medicare podcasts, the one that helps to shepherd you across the finish line. When you make that transition from Obamacare to Medicare, a lot of people find it to be a trying experience, or certainly challenging or frightening. And my goal is to help you across that change of life without inducing any horrible things that should cause you to regret having reached that part of your life. So I'm here to help you make the transition to Medicare in the least painful and the most expeditious way possible. And I do that because I have a book entitled Medicare for the Lazy Man 2022. It is, I think, the fourth or fifth edition of the book that I've been updating every year. And it is for sale on Amazon.com in all of its glory. It's got a hardcover version. It's got a soft cover version. It's got an Audible version, and it has an ebook or a Kindle version. And those are all for you to enjoy. If you sit down with that book and a stiff drink and start reading, I would venture to guess that by the end of your second stiff drink, you're going to be completely finished, and you will know more about Medicare than any other person in America has the right to know. There are secrets in that book that will change your whole perspective, and that will cause you to become your own Medicare guru in your own neighborhood. Isn't that something fun to look forward to? Now, often at this time of the podcast, I ask Randy to play our 30-second radio spot, because it kind of codifies how we expect people to, or how we would like people to access the information that we put out. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'll bet you Randy's going to play that 30-second radio spot. Medicare is complicated. Medicare can be confusing. Medicare is no fun to study. Will you know what decisions to make when Medicare time arrives for you? My name is Doug Jones, and I wrote a book to help you figure it all out. Medicare for the Lazy Man. It's on sale at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Also, you can download and listen to my podcast, Medicare for the Lazy Man, wherever fine podcasts are given away free of charge. Medicare for the Lazy Man, simplest and easiest guide ever. Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that. And in fact, I appreciate your presence here, making this podcast sound very, very good. How are things doing for you today?
I'm doing good. Well, as you can see, I'm in one of our new conference rooms at the Medicare for the Lazy Man Towers.
I'm always amazed at the number of rooms we have in the Medicare for the Lazy Man headquarters there.
As you can see out the window, we're distant from the mountains. You know, it's a wonderful view, and we have, lots of equipment there. We have whiteboards, we have monitors, you name it, we've got it, and they'll stay there as long as my green screen doesn't fall down.
Well, it's your green screen occasionally allows a lightning flash to pass through it. I don't know how that works, but no, you didn't do it then. Something that you do causes it to flash in the background. It's kind of spooky. I also find it spooky that we've been in many different rooms, conference rooms, and other areas of the Medicare for the Lazy Man headquarters, and I haven't seen one other individual. It's almost like the hotel from The Shining. There's nobody there except maybe a spooky little girl at the end of a hallway or something. It's
oh, well, you're right. I think the reason for it, Doug, I'm not sure, but I think the reason for it is that we do most of our recording off hours.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad I'm not wasting the Medicare for the Lazy Man revenue on a big empty building that doesn't serve any purpose at all.
you should see the people in this thing, at hours, that are more conducive to like business hours. I mean, they're just crawling around like ants.
Well, I got a good idea for maybe a little tweak that I should make in the nature of the personnel operation at the Medicare for the Lazy Man Empire. And I got that this morning from Elon Musk. Apparently, he caused a big stir by laying off his his president of diversity and inclusion. And I'm thinking, boy, you probably saved about $100,000 a year right there just by getting rid of that.
At
position.
least 100.
So I was going to ask you, since you're there with the actual personnel, could you have that person join me in a meeting later on after we finish recording? I have a little message to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pass the message. It's just like back in the old days. You get a call from HR and they go, "Hey, Bill, the HR director would love to see you about 2:00."
And you might as well take all your stuff. Here's a box to put it in.
Yeah, there's no meeting after 2:00 with the HR director that ever ends well. It's like the old joke. You're at some sort of a corporate-wide all hands on deck meeting, and they say, "Okay, everybody that wants to go to the holiday party, step forward, and we'll take your name." Not you, Randy.
Yeah. All right. Let's count heads. Don't count Randy.
That's right. He's not coming.
Jeez.
But it's I spent like 843 years in corporate America. So
yeah.
I'm a corporate citizen. In terms I escaped finally.
Sure.
But there are so many predictable things that happen in corporate America that it's not even funny, and it's getting worse. Back in the day, I used to work for, as you did, I'm sure you worked for an organization that had some of the great American ideals attached to it.
All the organizations that I worked for voluntarily had that. Yes.
Yeah. And my observation, well, certainly mine did too, but my observation of today's world is there is none of that going on. I mean, literally, people are walking around with Kevlar vests.
Well, that's because most of these people that are making the decisions are a bunch of sissies. Instead of standing up for what's right, instead of taking pride in being American and living up to the age-old values that our country has always espoused, as soon as they have some wacko that has a platform from which to spout their vitriol, these people cave in. They collapse like a cheap suit, and that disturbs me greatly. And I'm glad to see people like Elon Musk not caving in and dumping his. I can't remember the exact term, but the president of diversity and inclusion. How did he ever get one of those? How do you even allow that position to exist in your company? But yeah, I was always working in field offices. In other words, I was the regional manager for Pacific Mutual in Chicago. So I had my own office and my own people that I hired that worked for me, but it wasn't that many. And the only time I almost had a brush with a major organization was when I was invited to apply for a position in the marketing department at the John Hancock. What had happened was the marketing guys came from Boston and to Chicago. They were doing a dog and pony show in all the big cities around the country to introduce the new line of products for the following year or something like that. And they had a very entertaining show, and they were a lot of fun and everything else. Then there was cocktail hour, of course, because nothing happens in the John Hancock without some cocktails being involved. And in the middle of the cocktail hour, one of these guys looked at me and looked around the room to see if anybody was listening, because this was a big verboten thing. You don't come out to the field from the home office and try to hire away their employees. But this guy said, "Have you ever thought about coming into the home office?" So they were basically offering me the opportunity to interview for a job in the marketing department. And there are times when I have regretted doing this, but I said, no. And he said, "Oh, okay, just kidding. I was just kidding," because he didn't want to get in trouble for having tried to lure away field office people to the home office. I kind of think my life would have had an entirely different trajectory had I actually gone to the home office and learned everything on the inside. My grandfather, a magnificently successful guy, did that. He was a vice president for the John Hancock back in the 1940s and worked in Boston for a few years, lived on Beacon Hill. And they had a maid named Margaret Duncan, and I've told you about her. She came out to stay with my family and work for us in the 1950s. And she's the one who got the flu and barfed up her upper and lower dentures and flushed them down the toilet.
I do. I remember that. Oh my gosh, what a story. That's a great story. Well, my corporate life, I've lived in both places. I've lived in home office. I've lived in remote offices, and each has its own challenges. Obviously, in home office, you're closer to the seat of power, so to speak.
Sure.
And remote offices, you got to make sure that you keep visible, I guess is the best way to do it.
Well, you want to make sure they haven't forgotten about you.
Well, yeah.
or that one of your enemies isn't trying to torpedo your career behind your back.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of that goes on too. Everybody wants to come to the holiday party. Stand up. Nobody in the Nebraska region needs to stand up.
Yeah. Just step over to the side, will you? Now let's
right.
count heads.
Yeah, we've got some envelopes over there for you, and I'll guarantee you it's not an invite to the holiday party.
Can you see a little pink through that window of the envelope?
So anyway, it's a wonderful life if you can live it, but I've never been happier.
It's a young man's life.
Yeah,
I think it's a young man's life. And
really
I'm quite happy being my own boss of the Medicare for the Lazy Man empire.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Well, I suppose we could do something, even if it's wrong.
Let's do that. I got some things together to talk about today, and the first one I listed was odds and ends from Steve. We've got our old buddy Steve in Texas who sends occasional thoughts to share. And the thoughts that he gave me to share this time included some Ronald Reagan reminiscences. And he and I agree that Ronald Reagan was one of the greatest of all time presidents. And I'm sure Randy agrees with that too. But I started reading through this before Randy and I connected electronically today. And I thought, something, this doesn't really have a lot to say to the audience of Medicare interested people. So I'm going to thank Steve for sharing his thoughts. And he should rest assured that Randy and I are in full agreement with the fact that Ronald Reagan was a great president. But the fact that he had trouble with Joe Biden back in the old days is probably not germane to the Medicare mission that we're on right now. But, keep sending in the interesting things. I like to hear from Steve periodically. So the next thing is something that came in. I've got a morning briefing that comes from the Kaiser Health News. And I have, when I've quoted their news items in the past, I've always said, well, they have a reputation of being fairly solid and they don't have an axe to grind. And the more I read, the more I think maybe I'm wrong. They might be a little left of center when it comes to some of the stories they pick out, but I am a filter and I'm not going to allow any biased reporting of stories to cross my threshold. And so I pick very carefully what I choose from their morning briefing. And something caught my eye today that I didn't know anything about. And I watch Shark Tank religiously just because I love entrepreneurialism and I love the American inventiveness and the fact that we're a unique country in all the history of the world. And we foster, creative thought and problem solving. And even if a lot of the people who do those creative thoughts fall flat on their faces and get rejected by the sharks, I still find it good that there's another party behind them ready to try, ready to reach for the stars. So in this case, the headline I saw, and this is in Tuesday, June 21st edition of the Kaiser Health News morning briefing, Medicare could save billions through Mark Cuban's generics pharmacy. Now, I had no idea that Mark Cuban had a generics pharmacy. I have no idea what would draw him to it. And I got to tell you, out of all the sharks that I see on the Shark Tank, he is not my favorite shark. He doesn't like our most recent president before Joe Biden. They don't get along well together, and that's kind of a red flag for me. But he tried to emulate the television program, The Apprentice, and it was just a horrible, horrible, cringeworthy failure. I don't know, this was maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Mark Cuban had a TV show on doing the same thing as Donald Trump did, looking for an apprentice or a successor or an assistant in his business. And it was just, it was so horrible. And I think that's, well, I don't know. I don't know why it is. I could speculate all day long, but I'm not a fan of Mark Cuban. However, Medicare could save billions through Mark Cuban's generics pharmacy is the headline. So I thought, let's find out what this is all about. Harvard Medical School researchers estimate that in 2020 alone, Medicare could have spent $3.6 billion less on generic acid reflux, cancer, and other drugs if purchased through Cost Plus Drug Company, a new online pharmacy backed by Mark Cuban. The analysis finds that other insurers could also benefit from this business model. Now, there's a thing called STAT. I don't know what that is, STAT. It's quoted as saying Medicare could have saved billions on drugs if it paid what Mark Cuban charges at his new pharmacy. The body of that article is, amid growing anger over the cost of medicines, a new analysis finds that Medicare could have saved billions of dollars if the federal agency had purchased generic drugs directly from the online pharmacy recently launched by billionaire investor Mark Cuban. Specifically, Medicare could have saved up to $3.6 billion in 2020, or 37% of the $9.6 billion spent on 77 of 89 different prescription medications. This assumed the healthcare program had purchased the maximum quantity for each prescription, or a 90-day supply. The Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company did not offer any savings on the other 12 generic medicines. Now, there's a short little article in the Wall Street Journal. Buying from Mark Cuban's pharmacy could save Medicare billions, the study says. Mr. Cuban, the billionaire internet entrepreneur and owner of the NBA's Dallas Mavericks, launched his pharmacy in January with an eye towards disrupting the $365 billion U.S. prescription drug market by sidestepping health insurers and selling commonly used generic medicines directly to consumers with a transparent, fixed-rate markup pricing model. A group of Harvard Medical School researchers say that Mr. Cuban's cost-plus business model could also benefit health insurers, including Medicare, which spent an estimated $115 billion on prescription drugs last year, or nearly a third of the total U.S. drug spending. And finally, NBC News. Medicare could save billions, same headline. Cost-plus drug offers certain generic drugs, such as the depression drug fluoxetine, or blood pressure medication lisinopril, at discounted prices by selling medications at a fixed markup of 15% plus a $3 flat fee, according to the company's website. Cost Plus doesn't offer brand name drugs or accept insurance, so patients pay for medications out of their pockets. The study does show that Medicare is overpaying for some of the generic drugs, says a guy with about 6 names. Doctor. He's a researcher at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and the study's lead author. And he says this is a conservative estimate, so the actual savings are likely to be higher. And so I decided to do something uncharacteristic for me. I decided to do a little more investigating about this, because drug plans are a big part of Medicare. I think they became a part of the Medicare program in about 2006 under the Bush administration. And what they do is they have a whole bunch of plans, somewhere in the neighborhood of 23 to 25 plans available in any given geographic location. And they say, all right, these drug plans are going to likely help you, but they're all different. They're all constructed to benefit you if you have certain types of prescription meds, but not other types. They each have their list of drugs, but none of them has a list of all the drugs that exist. And then they have a different copay and a different, sometimes a different deductible, and there are all kinds of differences. So what I do is I take a client and I ask them what prescription meds they take and how much. I ask them where they like to get their prescriptions filled. And then I ask them, where they live and would they like mail order. And then I plug all of that into the government Medicare.gov website, and it will list every one of the 23 to 25 prescription drug plans available in their area in order of their annual outlay, their out-of-pocket cost for the cost of the insurance plus the cost of the drugs, the copays and so forth. And then that tells me which is the best plan for that particular individual. And that can change from one year to the next. The thing is, if you don't buy one of those plans when you're first eligible for Medicare, if you dilly-dally for a couple of years or 3 years or 4 years, then there's going to be a lifetime late enrollment penalty that you're not going to want to pay. So it's kind of imperative for people to buy the drug plan at their first opportunity rather than wait because they don't need any prescriptions to be filled for, they're still healthy and not taking any drugs for any reason when they're eligible for Medicare. Now, here's a monkey wrench. When Mark Cuban Drug Company and a Good RX drug card and some other players in the drug market decide to offer discounts on drugs that are commonly used, that probably makes it even a tougher decision for your average Medicare enrollee as to whether they want to spend a few bucks a month to avoid the lifetime late enrollment penalty that will come farther down the road. So it just complicates things. It clouds the decision process. Anyway, I've got the corporate goal or the corporate aim, the statement for Mark Cuban's policy, a letter from Mark Cuban. It's on the website of his drug pharmacy, his new venture. We started Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company because every American should have access to safe, affordable medicines. If you don't have insurance or have a high deductible plan, you know that even the most basic medications can cost a fortune. Many people are spending crazy amounts of money each month just to stay healthy. No American should have to suffer or worse because they can't afford basic prescription medications. If you are fortunate enough to have health insurance with a low deductible, the high cost of drugs is driving up the premiums that you or your employer pay, making getting health insurance expensive and challenging. Now, that's Mark Cuban talking, not me. The Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company takes these problems head on. Shockingly, in the USA, it's not unusual for disadvantaged populations to suffer from rampant outbreaks of hookworm. Normally, the drug prescribed for hookworm, albendazole, can cost as much as $500 per course of treatment, making the drug out of reach for many in need. So we started off by donating more than 10,000 tablets of this drug to cure parasitic infections in the most affected areas of the southern U.S. Our goal is to dramatically reduce the cost of drugs like albendazole, but we also think that it's just as important to introduce transparency to the pricing of drugs so patients know they're getting a fair price. Our cost for albendazole is $26 per course. We mark that price up by 15% so we can continue to run the company and invest in disrupting the pricing of as many drugs as we possibly can. That makes the base price of the drug $30. Then we add on the actual cost, $3, that our pharmacy partners charge us to prepare and provide your prescriptions to you. That makes the sales price on this website $33, far, far lower than the price available on the marketplace. Every product we sell is priced exactly the same way. Our cost plus 15% plus the pharmacy fee, if any. When you get your medicine from Cost Plus Drug Company, you'll always know exactly how we arrived at the price you pay. And as we grow and our costs go down, we will always pass the savings on to you. We started the company as an effort to disrupt the drug industry and to do our best to end ridiculous drug prices. Thanks for your support, and please let us know what you think. All right, so that's the corporate mission statement written by Mark Cuban. The only thing that I would caution people is that drug companies have to make a profit if they're going to recoup the cost of their investment in new drug research, plus continue to look for new drugs to solve other medical problems. I never want to do anything that interferes with the opportunity for drug companies to make a profit on what they're doing, because I don't want to live in a world where drug companies have closed their doors and are not able to operate profitably anymore. And I don't like these people that badmouth drug companies. Maybe what Mark Cuban has discovered here is an ineptitude in the drug company pricing process. Maybe he's discovered that there's a weakness or a poor decision process in the way that drug companies offer their product for sale on the marketplace. If they're able to buy them at a discount and the drug companies are still profitable, then I'm all for somebody finding a different way to bring drugs to the marketplace in a very benignly priced manner. And he's dealing with generics only, apparently. So at this point, the drugs that he's dealing with, the patents have run out, and presumably the drug companies have recouped their investment costs. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. People are yakking about drugs all the time, Randy, and this is one new venture that I had not yet heard about.
I had barely heard about it, but I'm glad that you actually discussed that, because I didn't understand, what was going on. But I do have a story to share with the audience that's very, very closely aligned to that disruption sort of a model.
Uh-huh.
As you know, I was born and raised back in Nebraska.
I heard about Iowa at one point. What was your Iowa connection?
Western Iowa is where my family basically is from. Western Iowa, but
Council Bluffs.
Council Bluffs, yeah, absolutely. And we'll tell a story about Council Bluffs someday.
Okay.
But I want this disruption model is very, very effective. I have personal experience with that model back in the Midwest. There was a company out of Sioux City, Iowa. You may even remember Gateway Computers.
Oh, God, yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, they used that cost plus disruption model, and it started with a couple brothers, I believe, if my memory is correct. Their last name was Waite, and they started this in college from their bedroom in Sioux City, Iowa, and drove it to the point that it was a multi-gazillion-dollar company. And
that's exactly what Mark Cuban did.
Yeah, and basically drove IBMs, the Compacts, all the other people out of business. Well, not out of business, but certainly into a different model.
Yeah, force them to offer their products at much more reasonable prices, and to add bells and whistles that they hadn't been. Yeah, and those guys, for people who don't remember, their logo was a Holstein cow skin.
Holstein cow. Yeah, and the boxes the computers came in were spotted just like a Holstein.
Exactly.
So oddly enough, around the Midwest, I'm sure it was the same way other places, they were known as cowputers.
Okay, I hadn't heard that. We did go to Sioux City, once a year to visit friends, and we did see all kinds of Gateway stuff all over the place. So I'm intimately familiar with that.
They eventually, I believe, now don't quote me, guys, if I'm wrong, but I believe that Gateway Computers eventually was purchased either by Compaq or by Hewlett-Packard. I can't remember. Now, just think about, a couple kids from the Midwest being eventually bought out by Hewlett-Packard or Compaq.
Yeah. Well, remember, it was the same story for Mark Cuban. He invented Dell computers. Yeah. I think he was in his college dorm room assembling computers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of guys, well, not a lot, but there was several people started computer businesses out of their dorm room, one of which shall remain nameless. But
why is he remaining nameless?
Facebook was a college project.
Yeah. I think a lot of that stuff was. These guys, Bill Gates quit college in order to perfect his his ideas for software management, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason to withhold names of people. It's not like they're being accused of crimes, are they?
No. And Bill Gates, as everyone knows, wrote the original DOS operating system for the PC. IBM contracted with him to do that. And so there's a lot of people around that era. That was kind of let me say, the golden age of personal computers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember a friend of mine did the research and he decided to buy an IBM PC2 or something like that, so, and it came with 2 megabytes of RAM and a chip. If you bought it on a certain day at a certain price, they would send you another 2 megabytes that you could install next to it. So it was fantastic.
Oh, I know. My first computer was a Panasonic Senior. It was a portable.
Yep.
It was like a big sewing machine.
Sure.
And that thing, obviously I was back in college, so I got a loan to buy it from the company, the store that was selling them, hey, buy this and we'll give you a good rate. Okay, fine. I'll take one.
Yeah.
And I think at the time that I bought that, I think it was $3,600.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
And guess I won't bore the audience with any more technical details, but guess how much memory it had?
I'm guessing it's the amount of memory in your little finger.
Well, you were talking about meg.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this computer came with 64K.
Oh, okay.
So it takes 1,000K to make a meg, if that tells you anything about it. But yeah, it was my first computer. It cost me $3,600, and it was called a senior partner. And you could either do computer work or sew.
Yeah. Well, I would have maybe gone over to Radio Shack to price a competing Tandy to see if those things were any cheaper. I don't know how else you would measure their performance, but back in those days, there was a little bit of programming available, and it was all on floppy disks. Yeah, and you had to keep swapping out those floppy disks. A friend of mine got an IBM, and it was really convenient because it had 2 disk drives.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So that was a
one
fantastic
for the operating system and one for data.
Yeah. And so, frankly, those were it doesn't seem like that was that long ago. To youngsters nowadays, it's like their whole lifetime, but it was the dawn of the computing age, personal computing age.
Well, old guys like me, I consider it the golden age of personal computers, but that I suppose that could be legally argued.
Well, I think computers have gotten better and better since then. So it was the dawn of I'm not sure it was golden, because looking back now, they were so primitive and there was so little programming available. I like to think of it as the beautiful birth of the computing era, but not necessarily the golden age. I think we're probably as close to the golden age now as we've ever been, don't you think?
Well, yes, I agree with you. There's one other just kind of a slant to that. Is the reason I always am very fond about that era, is that I'm a software engineer. So there was many things that I was dependent upon to do those things.
Yeah.
So that it was really, it was one of those situations where without a software engineer at your side, there was not really too much you could do with a computer back then. So I was, I guess my golden age was back when people needed me more.
There you go. That's understandable. A friend of mine, same thing. He was a crop consultant. And so he wrote his own program to allow farmers to use his knowledge, to take the knowledge stored up in his brain and allow it to be used by farmers everywhere. Now, the unfortunate fact of life there was that farmers are an incredibly tough market to sell a new idea to.
Oh yeah.
So it did not go well, and he had to continue to keep working. He worked in Sioux City for a major an agricultural chemical company that was headquartered there. So, he was always trying to perfect that program, and he gave up right before the .com bubble. And I always think That was a bad timing, bad time. Anyways, we
Oh,
should probably
dear.
let the audience go about their
Yes,
business.
we have used up our fuel. We need to bring her in for a landing. I just, we get to going sometimes, and it's stuff we just pops out of our head. I don't know what's going on here, but thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. We appreciate every last one of you, because without you, it wouldn't be nearly as much fun as we have. So up until we haven't talked about your book, have we? Or did you talk about that?
I did at the beginning, but it
Okay.
never hurts to mention it again. Or
Okay.
the if you want to contact us, DBJ.
If you want to contact Doug, and I'm sure you do me a favor and send him lots of email this week. It's dbj@mlmmailbag.com. Go to Amazon, grab a couple copies of his paperback. It's the green one, 2022 Medicare for the Lazy Man. There's an audio version, a Kindle version, which is obviously digital. And we are talking to Doug, and we've spent about 32 and a half minutes with Doug, the insurance guy from Oklahoma, now camped out in his fortress of solitude in Cave Creek, Arizona. Doug
Bye
Jones.
bye.